Hi, I wanted to talk about the something very important to me. I'll try not to look at my preview in the camera because it's distracting, frankly. But I wanted to talk about um, Star Trek, specifically the final episode of the Next Generation, and how it affected me emotionally, and what kind of frame of mind I was in, how special it is to me. So obviously, there are spoilers in here. I'm going to be talking about the episode, and I'm going to be talking about my life. So let's get down to it. Um, I had been really I became a Star Trek fan in fifth grade when um, when I began watching the series on weekday nights and so forth. And I quickly became, for that year, that fifth grade year, I quickly became a Star Trek fan. I absorbed everything about Star Trek. So for the following September, as sixth grade began, um, I there was a premiere of the Next Generation. Now Star Trek had three seasons in the 1960s, and those three seasons had been repeated over and over and over and over, and that's what I've been watching through reruns. And I read the comic books, and there were four movies that had been released, and I watched. By that point, I'd watched all four movies by the time the Next Generation premiered. And there was an animated series of about one season and some episodes beyond that. And so I became very familiar with that. So when the Next Generation premiered in September, I was beginning sixth grade, and um, it was a separate life for me. It was outside of school. I'm going to be talking about school for a good portion of this video. Outside of school, I felt very free, and I was engaged in all sorts of creative endeavors. I was reading books. I was developing my story writing abilities and my artwork and so forth. So, Next Generation premieres. I'll tell you about the first episode because it bears on the final episode I will talk about. I was born late 1975, so I was about 12. I was approaching the age of 12 when the Next Generation premiered. In the first episode, well, okay, Star Trek in general is about, in the original series, had been about it takes place in the future, and uh, Kirk is captain of a starship, and it's very much like the Navy. You have a crew um, operating the starship, and that starship is one of several starships in a fleet from Earth, and then eventually they have a United Federation of Planets mentioned. But it's essentially like the U.S. Navy. The Enterprise, it has several duties. It explores it explores the galaxy. It explores unknown space and space phenomena, like just weird stuff, and adds to our knowledge um, of what's out there. And then it also supports colonies in outer space, Earth colonies in outer space. So that's the crude explanation of the show, the setup of the show. And again, it's very much set up in like a naval setup. Um, and the Enterprise is capable of defending itself, shooting torpedoes and lasers and phasers, actually, and so forth. All right. So the Next Generation is set a century later. It has a new crew, but essentially the same premise. Um, so in the first episode, this is that first episode. It's the first adventure of the Enterprise in this 100 years later in this new Enterprise. I should mention that in the interim between the original series and the Next Generation, there were several ships named Enterprise, so that at the beginning of the Next Generation, that's the Enterprise D, meaning, there was a the original Enterprise and the original series had been adjusted and modified with improvements. And then there was a new Enterprise after that in the fourth movie that was called the Enterprise A. Um, and then there were two ships in between that were also called Enterprise. One was decommissioned or destroyed, and then they made a new one. So there were two ones after that, and then this is the Enterprise D in the beginning of the next generation. So there have been basically five Enterprises. Okay, so in this first mission, in the new episode, the first episode of the next generation, Captain Picard and his crew have orders to examine Farpoint. And this mysterious creature, this mysterious humanoid figure, well, a creature that takes human form, appears on the bridge, and he has what could be called godlike powers. He puts them on trial. He snaps his fingers and puts them in a replication of a 21st century courtroom, and he comes from a species or race called the Q, and he says that the Q continuum has condemned humanity as barbaric savages and intends to. They have decided to stop their exploration into the universe. So Captain Picard stands trial, and then the others are sitting beside him, and he defends humanity. And he says that there are many ways we can be tested. We have a long mission ahead of us, and so that's the 2-hour episode premiere. And at the end, Q leaves, but he says he won't promise not to return again. Of course, he appears a few times during the series. Okay, now in my own time, we go 7 years forward. There have been 7 seasons of The Next Generation, and a lot had happened in my own life, and a lot had happened to the characters in the show. So at the end, I just want to make sure that this is recording well. Good, it's still recording. Okay, so fortuitously, the beginning of the 7th season began. Oh, the 7th season of the show, the 7th and final season. It was announced it would be the final season. Began in my final year, my senior year of high school. So a lot had happened. This was late '93 and early '94. I had gone to a few Star Trek conventions. I had gone to a wonderful. I'd been a reader of the paranormal, primarily UFOs, and I had met somebody much older who was able to drive me to my to a 2-night lecture, Friday and Saturday, about given by an author of ufology, the history of UFOs and the phenomenon. And it was my first time, one of my first times, breaking out of the shell of being a child and going into an adult space. Stupid. I hope you don't hear that in the background. It's an ambulance going by. Okay, I also had just become an Eagle Scout, which is the highest rank you can get in Boy Scouts. I hung with it, and very few people who begin Boy Scouts, or even far fewer Cub Scouts, actually attain the rank of Eagle Scout. I was very proud of that. And so I began watching this final season, and about halfway through the season, this would be like January, February, I had just felt like this branching out. And then I'll try to be coy about this. around February '94, this beginning of the new semester, I made an overture to somebody, and it's she, and I wanted to. I wanted many things out of that. I wanted a friendship, and I hadn't dated before. I had not dated before. I had thought, I guess, no girl would really be interested in me or find me attractive or whatever, because in school it seemed I could see that people didn't seem interested in talking with me. It just didn't come up. That's not reality. That's just the way I perceived it at the time. But it was a whim, really, to reach out to this girl, and so I did, and um, it led to confusion soon. But I'll leave that out of it. It was very euphoric because I felt that I had branched out and broke the ice, so to speak. And I was very happy. I was very glad. I was very proud of myself that I took this step to. Um, I wasn't looking for a quick thrill or something. I genuinely, honestly, sincerely wanted to, because I liked this girl, and we had gone to school together since elementary school, and so it parallels the Next Generation in some sense, because that's when when the Next Generation premiered, and the year before that when I became a real dedicated Star Trek fan. So it had been a long time, the 7 years or 8 years. Um, so I felt euphoric, and I felt that I would always look forward to talking with her, or at the very least, I was sharing my creativity with her. Um, so I had succeeded. I had achieved something wonderful that meant a lot to me. So, all right, so it's around May when the Next Generation, this final 2 hour episode, airs. It concludes the entire 7 years. And so I wrote some notes to myself. These are thematic notes. But before going into the theme of the episode, which, before going to the theme of the episode, I want to just briefly summarize what happens in the episode. So again, spoilers. Um, um, Over the course of this season, there were two characters. There was Counselor Troy, who could sense others' emotions, and she was like the girl of the show, so to speak. And there was Worf, who was a Klingon, who was head of security, and there was Picard's first officer, like right beneath him, like president and vice president. He's the one in command beneath the captain. So at the start of the series, it was explained that Troy and Riker, who's the second in command, had had a past relationship, and they're sort of like, will they or won't they get together again, sort of relationship through the course of the series. And in this final season, I think maybe the season before that, Troy and Troy and Worf, the Klingon, had sort of started to have moments together. So this final episode opens with Troy and Worf on a date, essentially, and Worf valued his friend Riker, the friendship he had with Riker, and he didn't want to hurt Riker's feelings. And Troy says, well, I think you should start thinking about our relationship together, or our feelings. So then all of a sudden, the captain rushes over to them, and he's awoken from bed, and he says, I've been shifting backward and forward through time. So so through the course of the episode, he shifts from present day to three different time periods. Present day, 7 years ago, just before their first adventure, the first episode of the series, and 25 years in the future. He just he just randomly switches, finds himself waking up or shifting to a different time period randomly, and then the characters think that it's this symptom of old age. There's Irmotic syndrome. He had been they had detected the early signs in the captain of Irmotic syndrome, which is essentially becoming senile, like clinically, medically becoming senile, and essentially losing his mind. And they to them that's the truth. They don't know how to break it to him. So, um, meanwhile, he um, one of the moments when he goes back in time to 7 years prior, um, he sees a character suddenly introducing herself to him who had since died during the course of the series. I mean, the character died, and it was a wonderful moment to remember this person. I mean, he sees her suddenly, and he just this nostalgia, seeing her again. And all right, so quickly, um, the Q character suddenly reappears and says that he is the cause of humanity will be annihilated. Um, and Picard doesn't understand this. Picard suddenly finds himself in this courtroom that he was in 7 years prior, and Q character tells him, um, "You're doing it before." In other words, what you're doing that will annihilate humanity. You've done it before. You're doing it now, and you will do it in the future. And he doesn't. Picard doesn't understand that. So um, there's a thing called the neutral zone, where it was introduced at the beginning of the original series. This is, you may remember, like Vietnam had South Vietnam and North Vietnam, and North Korea and South Korea. There was a demilitarized zone. This was introduced in the original series. There was a race called the Romulans and the Romulan Empire. This was a border created after a war between the Romulans and Earth, to as a solution, kind of like after Vietnam, they created a barrier between North and South Vietnam, and then a barrier between North and South Korea, so that we just won't we won't we just won't trespass into the other one side, and now keep the peace. Well, it's called the neutral zone between the Romulans and and Earth, um, and the Federation. So they notice that there's some weird phenomenon in the neutral zone. So in the past, the earlier Enterprise goes to the neutral zone, and the Enterprise in the present day goes to the neutral zone. The Enterprise in the future goes into the neutral zone. I'm leaving out a whole lot of detail, I know. And they start scanning, and when they start scanning, he notices that this weird phenomenon is larger in the past, somewhat exists in the present, and doesn't exist in the future. And that's weird. It should go in normal flow of time. It should be larger in the future and be almost non-existent in the past. And so there's wonderful themes. I want to talk. It's not just science, science, science. There are wonderful themes. That's what I want to talk about in this video. In the midst of that, you don't know why, but you see Riker in the future. Well, no, in the present, Riker giving odd looks to Worf, and you can connect that with this separation, this awful separation over Troy. And you see that in the future, but you don't know all the details of what happened. They're not speaking. Riker and Worf haven't spoken to each other. In fact, in the future, you learn that Worf is part of the Klingon High Command now. He's not part of the Federation anymore. And he talks about Riker as not having any loyalty. Loyalty means a lot to him, and loyalty means a lot to Klingons in general. And so they're at this point in the neutral zone, and Q gives him suggestions or clues, and finally takes him back 3.5 billion years ago to Earth, and he sees that this phenomenon, this weird phenomenon, has spread throughout this area of the galaxy where Earth is. And he looks down and he says, "Don't you recognize your old stomping grounds? You see here these amino acids are about to coalesce and form the first protein. And humanity, what would become humanity, is about to form for the first time. And Picard doesn't understand. And so later on, I'll leave out a lot of the theme. A lot of the theme is about Picard being able to convince them in all three time periods to go take risks, to be able to understand what's going on. And along with that, trust. There are issues of loyalty, and I'm obligated to do this, but is my friend, and I should support my friend for the greater good. I'll try to cover that in the themes. I also don't want to belabor like a long summary of the episode, but it's a wonderful, beautiful episode thematically about about these things I'm about to talk about. So he realizes that what he did by creating this scan, inverse tachyon scan, was that it created something that went backward in time. In other words, it was not almost non-existent in the future, 25 years from now, and then it was existed a little bit in the present, and then it engulfed a whole section of the galaxy, or the entire galaxy, I don't remember, and that in the past, and then that eventually threatens existence on Earth, life on Earth, 3.5 billion years ago. So it's spreading, it's becoming larger as it moves towards the past. And that's the big revelation that Picard finally realizes. He makes the leap. He realizes that if this is anti-time, meaning it's going in reverse, it's progressing in reverse time, if that collides with our forward direction of time, it's like matter and antimatter. They would annihilate each other. So there's this thrilling moment when all three enterprises are in at the same time. They stop the scan, and I don't want to get into details, but they stop the scan, and then two other ships explode. You see the two other enterprises explode, and Q says this wonderful moment to Picard, 2 down, 1 to go. It's something like, it's been a great journey, but then again, all good things must come to an end, and that's the episode title. And so there's this big explosion, and then suddenly silence. There's a white flash, and Picard sees himself. Picard finds himself sitting in the courtroom from 7 years earlier. That courtroom that Q put humanity on trial with. He's alone, and Q says the trial never ended, and the Q continuum had made a directive so that Picard would cause his own the annihilation of humanity and life on Earth through that thing I was talking about, the anti-time and so forth. But Q, that idea of giving clues for Picard to figure it out, to make this great leap beyond what he knew to be reality, That was Q's idea. This Q character's idea, and he says Q tells Picard, for one brief moment, we something like, we were hoping that you would stretch your mind, beyond what's familiar to you. And he says something like, for one brief moment you did. Picard says, when he realized the paradox. And Q then adds to that, yes, for one brief moment, when you opened your mind to the endless possibilities of existence. And he says, um, it's not it's not exploring and studying stars in outer space. It's opening your horizons, and that was really wonderful, beautiful. And then Q leaves the room. There's a flash, and then there's another scene. In they're playing, the other characters are playing poker, and he says, and here's Riker and Crusher and so forth, and the others. And Riker, one of them asks, well, why do you think that Picard chose to reveal some things about the future? Oh, I should mention, Troy in the future had died, and that caused a horrible further rift between Riker and Troy, and they stopped speaking to each other at the funeral and beyond. And so this character says, why do you think Picard actually chose to tell us what happens in the future? And another character says, well, perhaps so that certain things don't happen. And I think that's the moment when Riker looks to Worf, and I think even Worf says agreed. And then Picard walks in for the first time to this poker game, and there have been poker game scenes in the past episodes, but this is the first time that Picard comes in, and he sits down and he says, I should have done this a long time ago. And Troy says, you're always welcome. And it was a wonderful moment, and that reminded me of this. I got to notice that my storage space here is becoming full, so maybe I can cut this into 2 episodes. Don't be surprised. So it just so that's where the episode ends. He says, a game is 5 card stud, and everything, and the sky's the limit. It's the end of the episode. I better stop recording now, just to be sure. That I've summarized, given you the setup of the final episode, final 2-part episode, I want to talk about the themes that spoke most strongly to me, and in that final episode, and how they reflect on my life. I've already talked about time, that the fact that it had been 7 years since the show began, but more so how much change had been in my life. As I said, when I became a Star Trek fan, I was in 5th grade. I was in elementary school, and this new Next Generation series, premiered in the beginning of 6th grade, and that was the final year of elementary school, and then 2 years of middle school, and then 4 years of high school. A lot can happen in 7 years, and that's one of the themes that the show was taught. The episode was talking about. This airs right at the end, right near graduation. I was approaching high school graduation, so it's really from high school graduation going all the way back, almost, if you include the original series, that earlier year, almost like halfway through elementary school. This is a long time. And the next theme is camaraderie, emotional support and trust. That was strong in this episode. There was Worf talking badly about his former best friend, Riker. um, and saying if Riker had any loyalty or genuine. I think he used the word loyalty, honor. If Riker had any sense of honor, he would have helped. He would have given the Enterprise. Um, he would have given Picard, who seriously wanted to resolve this situation, would have given him a ship with a means of getting into the neutral zone safely. And Picard arguing with him, well, you don't hide behind regulations and your new status in the Klingon High Command. The Worf that I knew would have found some way of doing it. And I find this a lot in as a theme in Star Trek episodes in general. You would have found a way. In fact, I remember in there are 4 movies before the Next Generation came out. They were depicting the original series, and I don't want to go into a tangent, but I remember in the 3rd movie, Kirk, his best friend, spoiler. This whole episode, this whole video is spoiler. So, this his best friend Spock had died, saving the Enterprise, and so in the 2nd movie, and then in this 3rd movie, he risks his career to see to it that Spock is brought back to life intact. And I remember one point where Spock's father says, basically, if he had not shared his mind with you, like input his mind into you, and you were separated, there was no way. Then perhaps he truly is dead, and there's no way of bringing him back. And Kirk says, no, if there was that much at stake, Spock would have found a way. And anyway, so I don't want to dwell on that, but that theme of camaraderie, and not only camaraderie, but loyalty and trust, and looking out for each other and doing what's best for each other is a strong theme throughout all the Star Trek series. So another theme was, and that just genuinely speaks to me as a person. I'm like that myself, and I like to see that in others. And also the 3rd theme, humanity enlightened. Well, first of all, I like it when series, stories talk about how the great things that humanity can do, and opening one's horizons, opening one's mind. I hope that this channel is able to do that. And this episode, of course, strongly does that. It's built around it. The idea that time doesn't necessarily flow in a forward direction. It could go in reverse, and just the idea of the concept of opening one's mind to other possibilities, and how closed-minded people can be, narrow-minded people can be, and how unwilling they are to be open to various ideas, just in general. I think it's just laziness. I think that they're capable of it. They're maybe indoctrinated or conditioned, or through peer pressure, they just don't stretch their minds. It's that aspect of imagination and considering other possibilities, so forth, that I guess I'm just naturally able to do, but I don't know how many other people are able or willing to do. And then the phrase "a lot can happen in 25 years." That's in one of the scenes in this final episode. Picard had these romantic feelings with the doctor of the in the crew, and he had not acted on them. In the past, it's explained that during the course of the series, little revelations come out to explain that his best friend had been dating um, Beverly, and Beverly would then later on become the doctor on the Enterprise. Had been dating Beverly, and so Picard had to make some decision at some point that um, cost that cost his best friend his life. So when the series begins, this is in the past. Uh, he meaning Picard encounters the uh, former wife of his best friend, now a widow, and and Beverly has a son now who's about 15, turned 16 during the first season, and there are some awkward moments, and he always feels like somewhat uncomfortable. Not always, but I mean, there's this undercurrent um, that he feels uncomfortable about his romantic feelings toward the former wife of the widow of his best friend, uh, deceased best friend. Um, so in the final season, um, they he opens up to her a bit. And then in this final episode, it turns out that when he goes into the future, 25 years, those moments in the future, apparently in that timeline, they had been married and then they were divorced. They became divorced. But Beverly still feels some loyalty and attachment to him, and he to her. And so that's one kind of That's one relationship of loyalty. And there's a thing between Riker and Worf, the strained relationship. In the future, Troy is dead, and both of them, or each of them, had affections and dated Troy, and now they they feel awkward towards each other. And these are people who would serve for 7 years during these series, and then of course this future is set 25 years afterwards. Um, so sometime after the funeral, these people who had been friends for 7 years um, just don't speak to each other. And at one point, I remember one character, I think it's Data, says it's the last thing that Troy would have wanted. Um, and I should say this now, I might as well say this now, that even though I had not encountered that at the time, but I still understood the importance of this, what they were talking about, this theme of separation. Um, Shortly after this episode aired, I don't want to go into details, but it really weighed heavily on me. I found myself contemplating this. Somebody I knew that I had just opened up to, we couldn't talk, which, and it really hurt my feelings. And I thought about this. I tend to think of the broader implications. Themes just speak strongly to me. So it hurt me very much. Um, and so going back to that line, a lot can happen in 25 years. So anyway, so there's the scene taking place in the present where Beverly tells Picard that there are signs of Irumodic syndrome, that he has the first signs of senility, and he says a lot can happen in 25 years, implying, well, maybe they could find a cure, they could find some way of treating the condition. A lot can happen in 25 years. And Crusher, they're in his private ready room, and Beverly says a lot can happen. The implication being she really meant also not only that his condition could become better, but perhaps their relationship could become better or grow closer. Um, and Then I talked about the Riker Worf Troy relationship, um, and also the concept of Picard possibly losing his mind. The other crew are very concerned about it. They're concerned for their friend, and they don't want to hurt his feelings. But it seems that he does have early signs of Irumodic syndrome, and eventually, according to science, he would lose control of his mental faculties, and that that could be devastating news to somebody like in real life. Somebody that you know, um, that you like. Where do you separate the? No, let me rephrase this. You should recognize the person. You should treat the person with dignity, even though this physical condition, I would call it physical condition, like whatever kind source of senility there is, or mental whatever their condition there is, you should treat it as a physical condition. It's not part of them. It's something that they're going through, um, and um, I was going. Well, I won't go into that. That a lot of us may know somebody going through that. I was going to mention a family member of mine that I think was going through that. But I was able to separate one from the other, um, even though I wasn't really sure whether it was reality or whether it was all in the person's mind. And I shouldn't say person's mind, I mean this condition, part of this condition. Um, so I think that's all that I wanted to say about this. But I also want to, I guess, conclude this video by saying that not a lot of people, it seems, a lot of people I know are Star Trek fans who probably have not, and they probably have not seen this episode. Sadly, I guess you could stream it. You could. There's probably some way of watching it online somewhere somehow. I think Paramount Plus has the episodes. They may have this episode available. It doesn't have as much impact unless you have watched a lot of the earlier episodes in the series, Star Trek: The Next Generation. But but it still holds true. It's very powerful in and of itself. This 2 hour episode. Um, I hope that, well, by watching this episode, people will understand why I have my own outlook on the universe and aspects that themes that I cling to. And I don't want to say cling to, that I that speak to me, speak naturally to me. So I hope I've expressed things well, and I'll talk with you next time.